Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy and Kurt Leavins. Welcome, gentlemen.
We meet again.
Hello.
Third time this week.
Third time with the three of us, and then it's like our fifth podcast.
Yeah.
Plagued with technical difficulties at my end of it, including in posting the podcast. So I'm going to make sure that the full podcast is posted this time. I had to go back and replace the last two because pieces were missing. I'm using some new technology here, and it's been very frustrating. Such is life. All right, big Oilers news today. Two pieces of news. One that had Oil fans absolutely elated, and then the roller coaster crashed with another piece of news. So let's those two pieces of news are the signing of unrestricted free agent Tyson Barrie on defense and the signing of unrestricted free agent goalie Mike Smith in net. So let's start with the first piece of business, which was the Tyson Barrie signing. Kurt, what did you make of it?
Game changer. For the first time in the Connor McDavid era, the Edmonton Oilers have a true elite power play quarterback on the blue line to play with McDavid and Draisaitl on the power play and 5-on-5. Game changer. Imagine how many more pucks will be headed north in this configuration. It's incredibly exciting. There is a question about where you're going to slot Barrie in because he's not a first pairing D-man. He's not a true number one D-man. But man, can he move the puck, and is he good on the power play? So love the signing. $3.75 million. It's a show-me contract, but boy, that's great cap hit, especially in this flat cap era. It's to me, it makes an already dangerous Oilers attack that much more dangerous, even more so than if you had Oscar Klefbom in the lineup. Love it, and then love it some more.
What can he do that Klefbom can't do at the point on the power play, Kurt? What special attributes do you think he has that Klefbom lacks?
Well, he's as good of a skater as Klefbom, and he's quite simply a way better puck handler, puck transporter than Klefbom. Oscar, look, I don't mean to denigrate what Oscar accomplished on the power play. After all, the Oilers had the number one power play in the league, so you can't take away what Oscar did. But he has not had a career like that. Tyson Barrie has.
Does he have a better shot?
He has a marginally better shot, especially with Oscar's shoulder problems. He absolutely has a better shot. And the other big thing, which to me, this is a real change. He's a right shot. And that really adds a different wrinkle to a somewhat predictable, albeit, powerful Oilers power play. Having a right shot D-man of that quality on that power play that's going to be hard to defend. I like it every day of the week and twice on Sundays.
My only concern on the power play is I got to appreciate the Klefbom metronome, which was him with like a metronome, tick-tock, proficiency and efficiency, putting the puck either to McDavid or Draisaitl on the half wall, right on their stick.
Or Nuge.
Every single time, or Nuge, excuse me, on the Nuge on the other half wall, every single time, right on the money, moving the puck at the right speed in the right spot every single time, and I think it's hugely underrated in terms of the success of that power play. Now I think the other teams were going to adapt to that. Chicago started to. They sagged and they gave Klefbom the shot. And Klefbom, I think, that doesn't work on your power play, given Oscar the shot. You're not going to score at a historic power play rate if other teams give you that shot. So Barrie, I think Barrie's probably I can't say. I haven't watched it enough to say. But, he'll probably be more creative and make better kind of heads-up decisions. But I hope he's the metronome. I hope he can get that part of it down as well and just really give service like a point guard to those other guys on the wing. Bruce, go ahead, Kurt.
I was just going to add, and the pure fact is Oscar can't play.
Yeah, fair enough.
He's out. And so I'm
Yeah.
happy to give you all those points on Oscar. I liked him lots too. I don't mean to take away from what he accomplished, but he's not available to them. So to bring this in as a replacement is 1 + 1 = 3.
Because really, we're comparing. The fair comparison right now is Bouchard and Bear, who are total unknowns on the power play, to Barrie. And I'm actually was pretty bullish on Evan Bouchard because he's been an outstanding power player all along. Kurt or Bruce, what's your take on this Barrie signing?
Well, the Evan Bouchard aspect is still very much alive and well in the sense that this is a 1-year deal.
Yes.
Right? It's not like they locked into the guy for 4 or 5 years and all of a sudden the road is blocked forever for Evan Bouchard. In a year's time, let's revisit it. So there's that. There's the contract price, which I'm shocked, frankly, especially if the rumors can possibly be true that he was offered $6 million by some other club and turned it down for $3.75 million for 1 year with Edmonton.
Sweet.
He's obviously looking to raise his stock and maybe he's looking for longer term in the long run, or maybe he's just thinking Edmonton's the place for me. It's that they've got that power play. They're missing their point man. They need everything. They check all my boxes. I'm prepared to make a little bit of a sacrifice to take that ideal spot for him. I mean, it's a real nice soft landing in terms of after his 1 year in Toronto where things did not go well. And he scored, after scoring power play points 30 and 25, the 2 prior years in Colorado, he had just 15 power play points in 2019-20 with Toronto. And of course, slightly shorter schedule, but scored at almost half the rate. So he didn't click there the way he had in Colorado, and the way I expect all 3 of us hope he will click in Edmonton.
Kurt, you have a point?
Yeah, I think the other thing this speaks loudly about is where the franchise is today compared to where it was 2+ years ago. In my opinion, Tyson Barrie doesn't sign this contract 2.5 years ago. Rogers Place, the growth of McDavid, the emergence of Draisaitl, I think more and more players are looking at Edmonton, despite the frigid winters, as a real place where their careers can flourish. Whereas before, you can see why, top-rated players might have passed this market by for obvious reasons. I think that dime is turned now, and I think the fact that a guy like Tyson Barrie is willing to come here for less than $4 million when there was more money elsewhere speaks to where the franchise has come over the last 2.5 years.
So with Bouchard, essentially the Oilers have 2 veteran D-man, Larson and Barrie, on expiring contracts this year. And they can watch Larson, they can watch Barrie, and they can take their pick. And halfway through the season, they can re-sign one of those 2 guys if they want to a longer term deal. And then the other one's gone, making way for Bouchard if he progresses. So there's that. Here's why I like this deal. I mean, the Oilers have been and still are desperate for puck-moving defensemen. As we've seen in the playoffs, it's so much a part of the NHL game is having those defensemen who can rapidly transition the puck, make good plays in their own zone, get that puck out of their end. And whatever you want to say about Larson, Benning, and Russell in terms of their defensive fundamentals and defensive intensity, which is all good, they are all weak. They're average at best to weak NHL puck movers. And I'd say Russell is the weakest, when he's on his right side. When he's on his left side, he and Benning were about the same, which was mediocre to poor by NHL standards. And Tyson Barrie isn't going to be that. He, his points production is consistent enough. He's clearly a gifted offensive hockey player who can move the puck. And so the Oilers have gotten rid of maybe their worst puck mover in Benning and brought in a player who might be their best puck mover in Tyson Barrie. That is significant for the team. It was a glaring weakness for the team, and they've corrected it. In terms of Barrie himself on a 1-year deal, I mean, clearly this is as Kurt, you're saying, this is a huge move for the Oilers being able to attract a player like this on a bargain contract. It speaks of the franchise. And from my point of view, if I had to pick, if someone said, okay, you could get Oliver Ekman-Larsson for 7 years at $8.2 million, or Tyson Barrie for 1 year at $3.75 million. This is hands down simple decision that I would definitely go with Tyson Barrie on the shorter term deal. I'm Tyson Barrie's statistics in terms of time on ice, points in different situations, time on ice in different situations, it is better than Larsson's for the last 2 years, Ekman-Larsson's for the last 2 years. OEL has had a slide in play, which may get better or may not, but looking out into the future, that player, I mean, it was an okay bet with Ekman-Larsson, but then you would have to give up other stuff, of course, to get Ekman-Larsson, which was the real
Right.
kick in the gut. With him, with Barrie, this is just a free contract. So this is like, I'm elated. The Oilers were able to improve their, I don't know, top four. Is Barrie top four? Like I think Larsson and Barrie are all kind of equal in different ways. They're all going to be getting about 20 minutes a game, I think, in different situations on the ice. But so I just really like this signing over the Ekman-Larsson signing.
Well, I agree with you
trade.
that you know what, with Barrie, all it cost was money, right? There's no
Yeah.
assets going out. That from an asset management standpoint, that's very good work on Ken Holland's part. You and I don't see completely eye to eye on Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and that's okay. Oliver Ekman-Larsson is still a serviceable first pairing D-man in the NHL. Tyson Barrie isn't. If anything, at most he'll be on the second pairing, and my friend Bruce suggested, and he might be right, maybe he's better off on the third pairing, because as a defender, he's no great shakes, right? He's really, from a defending standpoint, he's a third pairing guy, but your first pairing power play player. Whereas Ekman-Larsson was going to play 22, 23 minutes a night on your first pairing. But yeah, from a short-term cap management standpoint, while you're waiting for guys like Bouchard and Broberg to come along, I don't disagree with you.
Barrie and Russell could be killer together. Like, they could just mesh so very well, because Russell's such a cautious defensive hockey player, and Barrie's a good puck mover. So Russell just passes it over Barrie. Barrie gets it out, and if he doesn't get it out, Russell's there to back him up. That could work just fine. So
yep, agree.
I want to go through some of the quotes that other people have given us on Twitter about the Barrie signing, and I'll get you guys to react. Let's start with Bob Stauffer of the Oilers. According to both Darren Dreger and Frank Saravalli, Barrie took significantly less to come to Edmonton. 4 times he has had 49-plus points and 5 times 12-plus goals. A great bet on a short-term deal. Love it. That one speaks for itself. So we'll just, and it's kind of mirrors what we're saying. Here comes a more critical view. This is from analytics writer Mika Blake McCurdy at Ineffective Math, who writes, Tyson Barrie, 1 year at $4 million with Edmonton, is a weak defensive defender without many other substantial redeeming qualities. ... Barrie is all over the map in terms of quality over the years. Some years are much better than others for reasons that aren't easily explained by his context. Bruce, what do you make of that critique?
My cousin Mika, I would say redeeming quality. I mean, this is the last 5 years in Colorado, age 23 to 27. 53 points, 49, 38, 57, 59. So that's pretty redeeming in my view. His career average is 51 points per 82 games played. And, you know, like he scores like over 0.6 points per game, which is, I'm trying to remember the last time the Oilers had a defenseman there, maybe Surrey, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was in that 1 year. On the flip side of that, and this is just sort of taking the temperature of the player without having looked in depth since today's news, at least, he's been a minus 5 years in a row. So clearly at even strength. Now he's strong on the power play. He had seasons of 30 and 25 points on the power play his last 2 years in Colorado. And then this past year in Toronto, he actually did have a down year. He just didn't click. And whether that was a system thing or whether it was just the setup of the team or whatever, he only had 15 points on the power play, so not much more than half his normal production, and only 39 points, which is, you know, you say only 39, that's pretty darn good for the defender. You know, I can tell you how many times the Oilers had a 40-point defender in the last 10 years, and that's one guy, and that was Darnell Nurse in 2018-19. And otherwise, you know, I mean, so this is a level of scoring and offense from the blue line, and clearly that's what they wanted.
And this past year from Barrie, if you look at his post Mike Babcock numbers, they're way different. From the start of the season to November 20th, he got off to an awful start, never seemed to mesh at all with Babcock's system or Babcock's personality, whatever the case may be. His numbers look way stronger if you look at them from November 21st on.
Wow.
One of the things I notice with people who do this kind of analytics analysis is, and I don't know if this is a bug or a feature, but they constantly just look at even strength play and don't give much weight at all to the power play. And I'm starting to think it's a feature. It's not a bug, because they all do it. And they all end up with this kind of analysis. And they must really believe that this is the way to do proper analysis. But I think if you overlook the power play, you're overlooking a pretty important game state in the NHL. I would also say that these particular numbers that are used, these on-ice numbers, which are 5-on-5 numbers, weighing shots for, shots against, essentially, and sometimes taking into consideration the quality of the shot, sometimes not. I think there's some they're worth looking at. But if you think you can discern the defensive play of particular individual players from this, I think that you're probably putting too much weight in these numbers personally. I don't find them to be reliable. I think they're pretty reliable in terms of determining the offensive output of forwards. If they're on the ice for a lot of shots created and good shots created for a forward, I put weight in that. But it's a 5-man game, and to blame one player on the ice for shots against, I think, is an iffy proposition, and it can often lead to what I see as overstated commentary on the defensive play of a player. So that would be my take on that.
Yeah, I'm one of the first people to point out Tyson Barrie's defensive deficiencies, but if he plays in a kind of configuration that we just talked about, I'm less concerned about it.
With Russell in the third pairing, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fair comment. I'm not saying he doesn't have defensive deficiencies. There's enough people saying it who watch him day in, day out, and the numbers seem to go along with that. So fair enough. This is from former NHL scout and prospects expert Grant McCaig, and he says, and he wrote this before the Mike Smith signing: the Oilers have been the clear winner in free agency so far for me. Picked up 3 very good fits at a bargain price and for the short term. Smart work by Holland. Third line needed upgrading, and Barrie can run the power play this year. No rush on Bouchard either. Bruce, what do you think of McCaig's comment?
I assume that was before the Mike Smith signing, because he specifically said 3. And but for those 3, I mean, it's clear to me that Ken Holland has put a great emphasis on offense. As needing to be upgraded, and he's not wrong. Last year the Oilers had the number 1 and number 2 scorers in the Art Ross Trophy race, and yet they finished 14th in the NHL in goals per game. And so basically all the advantage they had with the big scores, they wasted with the bottom of the roster or with lack of production from the blue line. And in getting this week Turris and bringing back Ennis, who basically is a new Oiler with a handful of games here, just enough that we got a taste of him, we know what he's about, but he hasn't been an Oiler for any length of time. And then of course the return of Jesse Puljujärvi enters into that mix, and he, for whatever work in progress he is, his degree of offensive talent kind of shines ahead of a lot of the guys you see on the 4th line on the Oilers. And you got a whole new third line there, basically, of guys somewhere in the gap between the top 6 and the rest of the team, which is this huge void in between them last year. So I'm writing a post about that. If they ever stop signing guys, I might actually have time to publish it. Anyways, they've got now they've added Tyson Barrie to the blue line, one of the top offensive defenders in the league in terms of at least production. And so clearly that is an emphasis of Holland this summer, that he wants the team to put more biscuits in the basket.
I'd like to jump off the back end of what Bruce just said, because it's not like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are ever easy to defend against. But for the large majority of last year, opposition teams could focus their best defenders on those top one or two lines, because that's where, as Bruce just described, that's where all the juice was coming from. Now, do Kyle Turris, Tyler Ennis, and Jesse Puljujarvi have to prove themselves as an effective third line? Sure. But is anybody really going to argue that those three players are way better offensively than anybody that was on the Oilers' third line last year? So prove me, yes. But boy, the potential is way better than most players that were never going to produce out of that third slot last year.
Yeah, the Oilers last year, of course, and Kurt, this might have been an area where you and I disagreed. I never liked McDavid and Draisaitl on the same line. And by December, it was clear to everybody, including McDavid and Draisaitl, finally, that wasn't the best situation for them or for the team. And the Oilers then developed one line without McDavid on it, which was the best scoring line in the NHL. And should have stuck with that in the playoffs. And then they just need to find wingers for McDavid. Are they further ahead on that than they were? Maybe they are. If Puljujarvi develops, maybe they are. We'll see. Can he be an Ennis? Can Puljujarvi and Ennis get it done with McDavid? Maybe they can. We still, I mean, if you're looking, I saw one lineup today where they had Archibald and Cassian on McDavid's wings. And come on, like Archibald, he looks good, he hustles, but man, that when he was out there with McDavid last year, there was very limited success. So I think the Oilers have improved the talent on their forward lines. There's more options here with McDavid. We'll see how it works out. I'm still actually hoping to see maybe a trade. I think it's too much to ask for. We'll get into that in a second. Let's go to the Mike Smith. Signing. Bruce, what did you make of the Mike Smith signing?
They sure seem to circle back in a hurry. Mind you, we're talking about 26 hours from the opening of deadline to when they announced signing him. But in that time, it seemed like about 10 goalies got locked up by other teams or traded for. That the market was shrinking. I'm still hard pressed to think that he's the best name available on the market, but I guess once they sunk the money into Tyson Barrie, they thought, well, we've only got $2 million left for a goalie. We know we can get Mike. Let's and clearly the management and coaches, from everything they said last year and basically all of their actions until the end of the playoff series, they thought more highly of Mike Smith than many of the fans did, or certainly those who are tracking the statistics, where Smith has had decidedly indifferent results by some of the most important measures. But the most important measure to me is winning games, and I know stats boffins don't like don't.
You're
like
mad at me.
win.
You're mad at me, Bruce,
No,
for using that boffin term.
I'm just throwing it out.
It is a neutral term.
It is a neutral term. That's why I'm using it. That's why I'm using it. It's good. So analytics boffins will look at will hate the idea that goalie wins, which is one of the most derided of all statistics. But you ask any goalie worth his salt, what's the most important thing to him? And he's going to say, winning the damn game.
Yeah. Ask Grant Fuhr that.
Ask Grant Fuhr, one of my goalie heroes. Grant Fuhr, he'd be happy if the team would win 7-6 and they interview him after the game. You would never know. You'd never know that they'd done anything but win that game. And it was, anyway, and Smith had decent results. The team scored more goals when he was in the net. Now, what he had to do with that is maybe nothing or close to nothing. Maybe they played better just randomly, or maybe the team likes him. I kind of got the impression the team likes him, and that has value. He's, he's got some leadership skills, but I'm not convinced he's the best goalie at 38 years of age. Now, the good news is 1 year, and lower amount, lower base value, lower bonuses. So now instead of 2 million plus bonuses, it's 2 million all in. If he makes all of his bonuses, which include the Oilers going to at least the conference final, he will make only 2 million. And his base rate is 1.5. And from this distance, given how close together those announcements were, Holland made the decision, okay, the money I've got I'm spending on Barrie, and I got Smith in my back pocket, and it's time to take him out. And because it was like bang, bang, and both came through.
I wonder if Ken. Go ahead, David.
Well, I was just going to make a quick point, and I'll get back to you for your full take. It struck me though, Bruce. I think that Ken Holland had. I'm just guessing here because I don't think he's incompetent. I think he's competent. Oh. So a competent GM would have. He had overturned. He had looked under every stone, and so all the superior free agents probably to Smith had already signed by then, right? So I think that's, maybe there's Aaron Dell, I think his name is. Maybe there was someone who might have been okay-ish, but not noticeably or better than Smith. So out of the UFA, they were all gone to the other teams. That had happened. I was wondering about the trade market. And what I think is Holland probably was talking to Arizona and Columbus and those teams and New York, maybe, whoever had two goalies. And if the trade market had been appealing at all, or if he had a couple second-round draft picks in his pocket, which he didn't have, if the trade market had been appealing at all, maybe I think he would have gone down that route. And it wasn't appealing enough. Now, you could have said, well, why not wait? Why not wait a little bit? Because where's Smith going to go? Honestly, where's Mike Smith going to go? Maybe that would have been too big an insult to Smith. I don't know. But just wait. I think he could have waited a week here and signed Smith. Maybe something would shake loose in the trade market. That would be my only thought. That, was everyone just getting a little tired of this endless amount of work in the last week and just wanting to sew things up here? Because I wonder if things would change with Arizona, with the Ekman-Larson contract now weighing heavily on them. Do they budge at all? Do they budge in a week? Maybe they budge in 2 weeks. Maybe you can get Antti Ranta for cheaper at that point. So that was my only. I'm sure that he checked into all these things, and this is the best option at the moment. But things change, and I just wonder if he had waited and things might have changed for them, and they would have been able to get a better goalie. Because Smith, his save percentage of the 67 goalies who have played 30 games in the last 2 years, he's like 57th or 58th out of, like, he's right at the bottom for save percentage of goalies who have played any amount of time. He's 38. He's not going to likely to get any better. So Kurt, what's your take?
My take is this all turned on Tyson Barrie. There were 3 teams in on Tyson Barrie. I was told by several very good sources that the Oilers were going to be offering under 4, and that they thought, hey, if the other guys outbid us, the other guys outbid us. And I suspect if they don't get Tyson Barrie, they go in a different direction with the goaltender. But you can imagine the general manager thinking there, looking at the pool of players that are in the Oilers' reach. So eliminating, Taylor Hall et al. Who was the best player available at that moment in time? Tyson Barrie. And when the negotiations broke their way, and Barrie said, yeah, I'll take a haircut to prove myself, all of a sudden, Holland said, well, we can't turn down an opportunity to bring in Tyson Barrie at 3.75. Let's go get him. And at that point, they have a list of goaltenders. And Ken will have gone down his list of goaltenders and said, are any of these guys measurably better than Mike Smith, dollar to dollar? And I'm sure the answer they came up with, which I think, to be fair, is debatable, but I'm sure that's how they would have made the decision. And the other thing I'll add in is for the people that are against Mike Smith, there is a bit of recency bias here. Game 1 of the play-in is sticking in a lot of people's heads, mine included. But if you go back over the regular season, this guy did contribute a substantial amount to the Oilers' success in the regular season. I don't love the signing. I'm not going to pretend to, but I can defend it from that standpoint.
Here's what I would say is I'm a lot more comfortable with the Oilers goaltender situation heading into this year than I was last year, honestly. And this is with both Koskinen and Smith being older goalies in their 30s. It's because Mikko Koskinen played really well last year. He showed to me he's the number 1 goalie in the NHL. He may not be a great number one goalie in the NHL, but he improved year to year, and he could get better again. Even if Mikko Koskinen doesn't get better, if he doesn't, like if he's just the same goalie as he was last year, that's an average NHL starting goalie. You're not,
and
he doesn't kill you.
So, and if he plays 6 out of every 10 games,
yeah. So I'm less worried about goaltending than I was last year. That said, I was hoping that they would bring in someone who could challenge Koskinen again for the number one job going forward. That isn't Mike Smith. You know, I take both. Year. It was last year. I take both your points, Kurt. Like I think that the goalies they could have got for $1 million to $2 million. You know, I just wonder again if they'd been a bit more patient, if something might have shaken loose. But Smith, it is team chemistry is important, and if you do need older players on your team, you do need leaders on your team. If he's one of those, it sounds like he definitely was a leader on the team and a veteran leader on the team. That's important on your team. So if they're kind of weighing, like let's say it's Aaron Dell, right? So Aaron Dell, the last 2 years, his save percentage is 0.899 and Smith's is 900. So they're the same. They have the same save percentage. You're weighing these two goalies, and they have the same numbers last. Well, of course you'd pick Smith over Dell, who might be this non-entity in the dressing room. I don't know. Maybe he's a firecracker, but we know for sure Smith's part of this team. So I could see why they would make that call.
Yeah, and to add on to that, you know what? I think the franchise has maybe learned from a couple of mistakes. I think they realized how much they missed Matt Hendricks when they moved on from him. And from what I heard last spring, they underestimated how much Sam Gagner brought to that dressing room. And there's a certain thing to be said about chemistry. And when you've played the game and when you've been in the room, you kind of understand the extra value that brings. So moving out a guy like Mike Smith, who's a check in that column from someone who is neutral coming in because he's an unknown, I think that's a check in Smith's favor.
Bruce, any other thoughts here?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Like Smith is very much more the firebrand than Koskinen is more the calm, cool, collected guy. And I think they played off each other really well. I really liked the professional relationship between Smith and Koskinen last year, and they literally were an equal split in the pipes, 39 games to 38, wasn't it, that they appeared in? And it was, Koskinen's still the higher paid man, and this year the gap is growing, and I think Kurt's suggestion of 60% for Koskinen is quite reasonable. That seems like a legit split between these two, with Smith aging and Koskinen still growing into his NHL self. So if you looked at the list, I mean, even the goalies you were talking about trading for, David, Mrazek or Ranta or Kemper, none of those guys was 1.5 million with a 2 million ceiling. And the guys he could have got for that price, I mean, Aaron Dell, maybe Jimmy Howard, if you want to go deep into the Ken Holland history book, or else, as it stands, as of right now, they're over the salary cap. So the idea of going and getting a $4 or $5 million goalie, it wouldn't wash without a bunch of other stuff happening. Maybe they could have took the week to try and trade, say, Chris Russell and have more for a goalie budget. Maybe that's the thing. Or
that's what I'm thinking. Like, could you move Chris Russell to a team that needs to pay less salary for a goalie of the same price? That would be the trade. Let's leave off this segment. I put a Twitter poll up, and the Twitter poll says, which goalie and contract would you rather have? Mike Smith for 1 year at $2 million, or Jacob Markstrom at 6 years for $6 million per. So far it's just been up for an hour. We've had 1,000 people vote so far.
Not bad.
Okay, 67% vote for Smith's contract, 33% for Markstrom's contract, and I didn't expect that. I thought it would be because Oiler fans. Now this is mainly Oiler fans, right? So you expect the home team rah, but the reaction from Oilers fans to the Smith contract was almost entirely negative. And despite that negative reaction to the Smith contract, even with that, really negative. Even with that, because if you asked, do you like the Smith contract, I'm sure you'd get 80, 90% saying no. Even with that, they like what Edmonton's done here better than if Edmonton had gone, if Markstrom had essentially chosen Edmonton, which on a similar deal. Oiler fans have been seriously, majorly, intensely, ferociously burnt by bad contracts to aging players. They're all aging, of course, even guys in their teens. But, guys in their 30s, for older players, older NHL players, people are tired of it. We are tired of it. I am tired of it. And we don't want to see it, frankly. So I think that's reflected in this real hesitancy about what Markstrom got in Calgary, which could turn out to be a great deal for Calgary, but also has easily the highest potential, I think, of any deal signed so far to be the worst deal of free agency.
At least it's not a Bobrovsky, which was, I would say, the worst signing of all of last summer. Max term at $10 million, and he really crapped the bed in year one. Of course, he could bounce back, but that contract is, I think that's the last $10 million contract we're going to see for a goalie anytime soon in the two-goalie era, or the second two-goalie era. But Dave, the crucial distinction here, the first reaction was to the signing of Mike Smith, the player, the goalie.
Yeah.
The second question was about Mike Smith, the contract.
Yeah.
And the contract and the player are two very distinct things these days. Mm-hmm. And in fact, in the cap era, so many people have come to define a player by his contract. They like or dislike a player based on how much he's getting paid versus what they think he's worth.
Yes.
And in the case of Mike Smith, well, many people just dislike the player. They don't trust him as a goalie, whatever. The reason is, they didn't like his attitude when he played for Phoenix all those years and kept beating the Oilers over and over and over again, or whatever it is. I mean, I think there's some antipathy towards the player, but the contract, compared to many of the alternatives, that contract's not bad. And I make the case, you could make the case, I'm not going to make it, I'll put it this way. You could make the case that the contract Mike Smith had last year versus his results was a value contract. At least up to its value contract.
And
he made half of what Koskinen did.
And people have hated the Koskinen contract, and it's turning out to be, that contract last year, the Oilers got excellent or good value at the very least on the Koskinen deal. I don't hear any of the people who were belly aching about the Koskinen contract. Maybe I don't follow them or I blocked them all. I don't see them complaining about that contract anymore. If they are, you'd have to ask them why, because it's turning out. So people are wrong all the time, of course, like fans are wrong all the time, and I'm wrong all the time. We all get things wrong. Some fans are more wrong more often than others. Is the only thing like that.
David, you bring up a really good point. I'd like to throw in a point of context in here. All of us, to some extent, tend to get hung up on a point. We tend to focus on isolated situations, and good general managers don't do that. Good general managers tend to look at a roster and understand how everything is interconnected. And Bruce and I were having a conversation earlier on in the day about the composition of this team now. And I think we're going to see a not so subtle change in how this team plays on the ice next year. We already talked about the composition, the different composition of the top three lines that we anticipate. I think that the puck is going to be headed north way more frequently this year than last year. If you think about it, you've got Tyson Barrie and Ethan Bear, who are really good puck movers on the right-hand side, and two very good transporters, Nurse and Jones on the left-hand side, with arguably an improved top six.
Improved top nine, for sure.
Top nine, for sure, which is actually, sorry, that's what I meant to say, improved top nine. I think arguably if you have as good a goaltending as you had last year, the team's better because you're spending less time in your own zone.
I like the cut of your jib there, Kurt. All right. I don't know what that means, but I like it. Is it a sailing term?
Since I live on Sailor Road, I'll take the cut of your jib.
Yeah, that's a sailing term, isn't it? It's like
it is.
The jib is a sail. Yeah. My dad sailed Hobie cats, but I don't never got into it myself. Okay, let's talk about the final thing we'll deal with is, are the Oilers essentially done here? Is this it? Is it over? And Bruce, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
Do you think it's over, or is this it?
Well, anything that comes from here is a depth signing. I still like Dominic Cahoon. I still like Slater Kukuk as guys that might be useful depth players. I don't think we're going to get them though. But in my preview on Thursday night, which is 36 hours ago, I had 4 white spaces on my roster: a left wing, a center, a right defenseman, and a goalie. And since then, they signed Tyler Ennis, Kyle Turris, Tyson Barrie, Mike Smith, and all 4 of those spaces. Like, I'm looking at my roster now, and there's no more white spaces on it. It's all filled in. I'm also looking at a roster that adds up to a total cap hit of $81.464 million, which is to say $36,000 under the ceiling with 23 players. Of course, the huge wild card here is I've deducted nothing for Oscar Klefbom, who seems certain to be spending much, if not all, of the season on long-term injured reserve. And if he does that, then they still, it'd be nice to have some certainty, but obviously that's not forthcoming anytime soon. And it's not quite the Dustin Byfuglien situation where he hung the Jets out to dry last year, but it would be nice to have something a little more concrete on what Oscar's plans are. But if he's out for the whole season, then they're down to 7 defensemen, and I guess that makes room for Evan Bouchard, who I put Tyson Barrie in the Bouchard slot for now, but he's got 2 guys to sign. Is the other thing is that does not include the contracts for Bear and Lagesson, so that's where a lot of the Klefbom money will go, is to pay Bear.
Could you give more? Here's what I was thinking. With you just hold off on what you say to Bear is like we're either going to go 1 year and you know what you're getting 1 year, but let's just wait to see what's going to happen with Oscar, because if Klefbom isn't going to play, like if he gets surgery, for instance, and he's not going to play, you could say, hey, Ethan, how about a 4-year deal, and we'll give you Klefbom's money from this year. You'll bump up to $4 million or something like that, and you get a longer term deal. And is that a possibility, which might happen?
It's still pretty tight, because I like literally it's at 81.5. Take out Oscar's $4 million, but you have to pay Lagesson and Bear and leave some slush for injured time. So there's not even $4 million to give one player. Yeah. But you could say, okay, Ethan, now we can go 2 years or 3 years at 2.5. And then we'll bump you again after that. So there, it opens the bridge deal up to a second year and a nice raise for the guy, which he's certainly earned. So
Kurt, are we done or not?
I'm not convinced that we're done. Very briefly on Ethan Bear. Remember, he doesn't have arbitration rights.
I know. Yeah.
So I think they can grind the player to an extent, and in a year like this, economically, that might have to happen this year. Last count, I think they have 15 NHL forwards under contract. That seems heavy. And when you look at center, left wing seems crowded. Where is everybody going to play? Yes, injuries happen. But if we started play right now, you got one more right winger than you need. So sure. I'm not convinced that they're done, but I think they're probably close.
Could they trade like Chason for a draft pick, for instance? What might that be something they consider at this point?
Sure, but if they don't need the salary, I don't know why they do that right now. You know what I mean? I think Chason he's one of your 2 wingers on the power play, and proven fairly successful up there, him and Neil. Because right now Archibald projects to be your 4 right wing, right? Yeah. Puljujarvi your 3. Yamamoto your 2, and Cassian your 1. And you might argue swapping those players around, but
so where's Chason there in there?
Well, that's my point.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
but if you put Chason in 4, where does I just said his name, who's 4th right wing. Sorry, just gapping. Archibald. Then where does Archibald go? You didn't bring Puljujarvi in to set the press box, or surely they didn't bring him in to play, 4 right wing. So it just feels like something's got to give there. So that's the one thing that's the shoe that I'm waiting for to potentially drop.
Bruce, do you think they're done?
Well, Patrick Russell makes sense as your fifth right wing. I'm not sure that he's
Yeah,
not redundant as your sixth right wing, which is
Yeah,
basically how he slots in right now.
and he's like
Uh,
700,000, right?
yeah. I mean, that's what you want for your 13th man.
Mm-hmm.
But he's they got one more man now. Of course, you're always dealing with injuries, and you want to have NHL caliber replacements. I mean, that's what Alan Quine supposedly was about. And I mean, he got a one-way contract, so you could argue he belongs on the roster right now, or I think he's a tweener myself, and they just paid to have an NHL caliber tweener. But I think they may be done signing, and yet there may be other moves in the offing in terms of a trade, some kind of trade or readjustment of the roster, as I
Well,
said.
here's another thought. Where does Jujar Kara play?
well, that's it. Like they could trade
Uh,
Kara. I think they could move Archibald and Neal to left wing. I think they both have played left wing. So it depends on Nygaard's health, but I could see them moving Kara. I think one of the physical players is going to get moved because I think there's a market on some of these Eastern teams. They all seem to be crying out for heavier players right now. So you have Chason and Kara, Cassian, Archibald. One of those guys could easily. I don't think it'll be Archibald or Cassian, but I think either Kara or Chason could easily get moved right now, and maybe it is just for a draft pick. Maybe you don't want a body back. So it's a team that needs, like Ottawa. They need players. They're $10 million under the cap floor. I think I read a tweet yesterday. Maybe that's changed by now, but there's some teams that need to take on some salary. Chase on for a third pick or a fourth pick, or Kara for a third or fourth pick.
Yeah,
I
and
could see that.
and JJ can play some center, and from what I understand, scouts have always kind of admired his size. So I think there might
I
be a
wouldn't.
taker for him out there. So
Maybe both. You just never know. Like,
yeah,
I like Chase on as a player quite a bit, actually. I wouldn't like to see him go. I think he's a fantastic power player. I just love the way he's like filled into that role, and I think he is a little bit better than James Neal, but James Neal's pretty darn good there too. So it's not like they don't have a guy to play the net front, and it's not like they can't even experiment with like Turris or Puljujärvi on the power play as well, and go to a slightly different formation now and then. So
Tourist is interesting, right? Because he brings the right shot.
yeah, and Puljujärvi does as well. So they,
Yep.
you can try different things. Both guys can really pass the puck. So we'll see. I think there's probably one more trade of an Oilers forward will be the last move. Would be my bet.
Well, any thoughts that it's not Ken Holland's team now? You can look at that list of six right wingers, and the only guy under contract now that wasn't signed or re-upped by Ken Holland is Kyler Yamamoto. He's in the contract sense, he's the graybeard entering the third year of his entry-level contract, because all of Cassian and Russell and Chason and even Puljujärvi, all four of them were originally signed by Peter Chiarelli, but all four of them have had an extension negotiated through Ken Holland. So that makes them now his guys, at least by my math. And Josh Archibald is the other guy. And of course, Holland originally brought him in and re-signed him as well. So this has sort of got the Ken Holland stamp of approval on the list of right wingers. And I'm pretty sure he's not trading Kyler Yamamoto. So the second oldest contract beside his is Alex Jason's. So all the other guys got signed in 2020.
Yeah. All right. Let's leave it there. And thanks for talking today, guys. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Kurt.
It's always fun. It's like this has become a regular thing.
Oh, well, it's been an incredibly busy week, man. Oh, man. I think we got about 25 posts between Kurt's 9 things from last week and his 9 things from this week. I think there's something like 25 posts and 5 podcasts in there. So we've all been working pretty hard at it. I mean, it's just crazy how they stomped everything into this sort of 3-day interval between Tuesday night and, well, I guess Saturday, so we'll call it 4 days. But
yeah, we're that busy and nobody's playing a game.
yeah. for a long time. But for now, we got lots to talk about.
Could be pretty quiet in the next little while. Anyway, guys, you guys have done fantastic work all week long, and couldn't have two better colleagues. It's just fantastic working with you.
Right back at you.
Alrighty. Thanks again.
All right, thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.